This is Patrick Roth, Senior Support Technician for E1 Business Solutions. Today we're going to look at something I've run across a couple times, and I thought it would be interesting to talk about. If I run this map, it's a SOP integration map. 3 documents and 3 failures. It is nice that at least we get a clue for our problem. The task delete SOP distribution has failed, and the error was unable to cast object of type System.Int32 to type System.String. Now we do notice that it did say 3 successes. And so those documents were successful. If I would look in GP, they would be there, perhaps not, right? Because obviously whatever this task was supposed to do didn't run successfully. So if you pull up the integration and pull up the task, we can immediately jump to, it's a SQL command. So it's delete SOP distributions. Now, if we look at this task, we might think it could be a SQL error, right? So in this case, it's deleting from this SOP 10102 table where the type is SOP 3 equals 3, which is an invoice, and then the SOP number equals the row and column. So it's trying to delete distributions out of this for the integration, for the SOP integration that we just ran. And it's where sequence number is greater than sequence. So it's checking a couple global variables. And so we might think that perhaps something is wrong with these global variables. And that's hard to see, of course, because we're using globals. We don't know what the values are when the map is populated. We'd have to run a SQL profile trace. But we don't think that it's going to be that of a problem. You know, if we're going to test this when you're writing it, then it's easiest if you run this in SQL Management Studio and of course put in real values instead of the placeholder variables, which of course isn't accurate necessarily, because if you have problems with the variables in the map run versus what you hand edited, it might be misleading too. So still, it could be that we would need to do that SQL profile trace. But if we look at this, if we look at the errors that we saw initially, let's run it again. System.Int32 to type System.String. Now these are not how SQL would define the data types. SQL wouldn't say System.Int32. It would just be an int or a big int. It wouldn't say System.String. It would be varchar or an nvarchar instead of string. So those are not the right words for a SQL error. So we maybe wouldn't think it's the SQL itself, except for the fact it is the task. So it is something in that SQL. So if we pull up the map again and look at the task, before we just focus on the delete statement thinking we must have some kind of problem, but as it turns out, there's this. Now this is select add at row count. So if you run a delete statement or update statement and then you check the add at row count, this is going to give you the number of rows that was affected by the previous command, whether it be a select, insert, or delete, either way. And it would tell you. Now this is a great debugging feature. So if we were in SQL Management Studio, perhaps when we wrote this, maybe we want to run this so we can see that, I expected that 2 rows to be deleted or 3 rows deleted, and this would be visual verification in my SQL that actually 2. And so what I might have done was just take this and paste this whole entire statement right out of SQL Management Studio here. But the interesting thing about this, now again, this is a SQL task. We don't normally expect to be returning results, but this is giving us back 1 row of 1 column of data. Now, I was thinking perhaps that the problem might have been is SmartConnect does have the ability to update global variables with a SQL command result. So in this case, I thought perhaps that I was returning data and I just had neglected to mark this. I didn't mean to do this at all, but if we want to test this theory, we can just pick a random global variable here. We'll just pick this and we'll save it and we'll run, and it still fails. So that might think that that's not a problem because obviously that didn't fix the problem, but it still is. And the reason why is in SmartConnect 21 and 2018 and .com as far as that goes, global variables are all strings. Now the difference in here is select edit at row count is returning back an integer. And so is it possible that the problem is that we're expecting a string to go back out of here instead of that? Now, of course, the easiest solution in this case would be is just delete this line, because it's not going to do us any good in SmartConnect. So the easiest solution for this would be just delete this line. If we did need that value, for some reason, maybe we wanted to run this and keep track of how many records got deleted, we need to cast this. Now we could use the cast statement, we could use the convert statement. Easiest from a SQL perspective, just use the str function and run it. So this is going to stringify this row count into a string, which is going to go into this global, which we won't care about. And if we run it, it's success. So a couple things that are interesting here. Again, in SmartConnect SQL tasks, we can return results back to a global variable if we want to, and you can't return back multiple values. You'd have to put them together as multiple string concatenations, so I could return back this plus other data if I wanted to, but it would have to be a one big string to parse out later. So we can return that back too, or if we make sure if we're ever returning anything back out of a SQL task, it must be a string, not an integer, not a decimal, not anything other than a string value. So this does solve the problem. And again, from our perspective, since this was just validation testing thing, the easiest solution is just to delete it.